Hi everybody, my name is Terry, and in this episode of Operation Overhaul called Back to Black, we are going to paint some stuff. We're going to paint the silencer for the exhaust header pipe, the head of the engine, and the barrel of the engine. So stick with it, should be fun, and if you haven't seen the first 3 episodes, please check them out. Now, one of my loyal viewers has complained about the interstitial music. In other words, the music that I put on when there's long bits that don't require any explanation. He doesn't like the music, so especially for him, this is for you. Hope you enjoy it. Alright, that's quite enough of that. Maybe he's got a point after all. Anyway, now I'm getting on it with the sander, and what I do is I start with a fairly coarse grain and then work down to fine grains to get a nice smooth finish by the end, but still leaving a little bit of abrasion on there because it helps the paint to stick. Shiny. So here we are in my homemade paint booth. So I've got a broom handle strapped to a step ladder, and I've got wire going through the middle of the silencer, and that's because I'm going to pump quite a lot of heat into this later, so string wouldn't do. And I've just cleaned it with some sort of silicone cleaner, which gets all the grease off. And now I've got this high temperature paint. This is a high coat. I've tried the Simonez one, and I thought that was absolutely rubbish, but this is high coat. We'll give this a go. Mist first, then a thorough coat, and now I'm putting a heat gun into this, and I'm giving it about 300 degrees from either end for half an hour, and then the header gets exactly the same treatment. The header pipe's a bit easier to do than the silencer because it's got this nice attachment lug halfway down, so I made a little hinge and a little bit of wire, managed to suspend it from that. This gives off some pretty nasty fumes when you're doing it. That's why I'm wearing a mask, and it's a pretty boring job, but I think the finish looks quite nice. What will be the real test is whether it goes dull and starts to brown off over time, or whether it stays a nice matte black, as I hope it will. There's quite a bit of stripping down to do before we can repaint the head and the barrel. I wouldn't want to do it on the bike, you wouldn't get a neat job, nor would you be able to cure it properly. So we'll start by removing the spark plug and then disconnecting this oil line which goes into the rocker cover. Then we'll take off the tappet cover on the other side. I've got odd bolts here because over the years the original ones have fallen away. And then we'll go and undo all of the bolts on top of the rocker cover. Some of these are a little bit difficult to get at, and they're a mixture of metric and imperial sizes. I think the person who had the bike before me was quite pragmatic about how they replace bolts. Some of them have been helicoiled and so on, but we'll make best efforts to get everything off without breaking anything. I wouldn't normally bother with this, but because these bolts are different lengths and different sizes, I've just punched some holes in a bit of cardboard and then I put them in exactly the same orientation. This really speeds things up when coming to put it back together. Mostly it's easy, just take a photograph, but this is a little bit complicated, so I do this. Now I'm just reaching over to the crankshaft and turning the engine until the push rods are at their lowest elevation, and this will make it much easier to get them out of their tubes. So by lifting the rocker cover up, tipping it to one side, we can just about get the push rods out. When we come to put them back in, it's not quite as easy, but I'll show you a method for that. With the push rods out of the way, we can now lift the rocker cover, rotate it anti-clockwise, and bring it away, being careful not to damage the oil line as we do it. On the top of each valve stem there's a little hardened steel cap. Remove those, keep them safe, you wouldn't want to lose them. And then we'll take the gasket off. I'm not being too careful here, and in fact I'll probably do rip it as I pull it off, because I've already got a new one arrived by post. The head is retained by 4 bolts, and they are tightened down with quite some force, so it's a good idea, just so that we don't warp the head at all, is just to crack each of them a little bit and then work your way around, and then once they're rotating freely, then have at them and get them out. And I was pleasantly surprised to find they're all quite tight, because the 2 nearer ones to the camera are quite difficult to get at. You'd have to take the rocker cover off to tighten them up. So the reason for a little bit of blowing from the head that I'm experiencing must be that the gasket wasn't quite seated correctly. So we'll take the opportunity while we're painting the bike to address that as well. So off with its head then, and then you'll notice that the down tubes come away with it. We'll remove those and the old gasket, which is made of copper. Now we'll put a valve spring compressor over the valves, fish out the two half moon shaped collets, and then when we release the valve spring compressor, then the spring and all the bits to do with that arrangement will come out as well, and we'll put them safely to one side. And as we progress with this is starting to feel like one of those jobs that grows arms and legs the further you get into it, because it's obvious that there's quite a lot of carbon inside the head. The valves need cleaning up as well. So we're pretty much going to, as well as replacing the gasket, annealing a new one and putting it in, we're also going to end up cleaning the piston and the head and the valves and getting it to the best shape we can. And why not? Because we're already into the engine, so let's get on and do it. So let's get the barrel off next. This is really simple. This is just 4 nuts, and much the same way we remove the head. There's a lot of tension on these, so just crack each of them a little bit before we go wild and unscrew them. Now when we lift the barrel off, of course, then what will happen is that the piston will want to just flop to one side. So we've just got to be ready to catch it, and I'm going to put a bit of rag around the con rod to hold it steady, and also to stop anything dropping down into the crankcase and becoming a hazard. Now to remove the piston itself, so we can give it a good clean and have a look at the rings. So we'll take the 2 circlips out, one either side of the gudgeon pin, and then we'll try and push the gudgeon pin out. Problem is it's really sort of stiff in there. The piston itself is made of aluminium, which expands quite readily, but it cools down really quickly as well. So this can be a little bit tricky. So the idea is to get a fair bit of heat in there, and then quickly, before it cools down, but without burning your fingers, try and push it off. I found that when it was a little bit tricky, then using a socket on one side and pushing with that was quite a good way of doing it. Right, off it comes then, and now we'll get into the business of cleaning up the barrel. So whenever you're cleaning metal like this, the golden rule is to use a brush with material which is softer than what you're cleaning. So in this case, a brass brush is pretty good for getting in there. And obviously it takes hours to get in and make a decent job of cleaning it, and you need compressed air as well for the bits you can't reach. This would be much better, of course, if you could clean it by blasting it, get it right back to bare metal, but I don't have the resources for that, and this should be good enough. But what I do want to do is bake the paint on to cure it, so I'm going to see if I can buy an oven.
So I'm driving to Wisbech to pick up an oven. 15 quid on Facebook Marketplace for an electric oven. That's got to be worth a punt, hasn't it? Let's have a look, see if it's any good. Well, here's the oven, safely strapped up in the passenger seat.
So I got the oven safely back home, I had a quick play with it, and it does look as though it's fit for purpose, so that was a bargain, 15 quid. So having masked up the barrel, let's give it a quick mist coat, and then half an hour later, proper paint coat, and let's get it cured. Okay, 205 degrees for 30 minutes. Counting down. And now the oven is on its cooling. So let's press stop. Let's open up. It's gone kind of grey. It doesn't look particularly black anymore. We followed all of the instructions. 100% not. Yeah, we'll let that cool down and we'll pull it out. Should be cured now. It's still pretty hot. Get out. Oh, here it is. Well, what I would say is, that ain't really black, high coat. That's kind of off black, bordering on grey.
but all right, it'll do. At least it's cured.
So the head's going to get the same treatment, only slightly complicated by the fact that we've got to sort of get all of the carbon out from the top first. So using a brass brush and various cleaning products, we'll get that done. And then we'll get the head painted and we'll get that into the oven as well. Now you may have noticed that attached to the side of the head onto the inlet manifold is this baker-like bush here to which the carburetor attaches. This is very common and it's used to separate the heat of the head from the carburetor so you're not atomizing the fuel early. It's perfectly alright to put that in the oven. It is designed to get hot. So there we are, everything painted up. A lot of work, but not too bad and quite cheap. The tin of paint only cost 12 quid. The oven was 15, so that was pretty cheaply done. The proof of the pudding will be whether everything stays nice and matte black or whether it just sort of greys off and the paint starts to peel later. But I'm pretty positive about this because we've taken the time to bake them. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Hope that made sense. See you next time when we continue the overhaul of this Matchless G3L WD. Thanks for watching. Ride safely.